beautiful people, my name is Venti, and today I'm here to bring you 5-Minute Fairy Tales, a new series for this channel where I summarize, review, and critique reimaginings and retellings of classic fairy tales. Before I get into today's video, I want to give several very quick disclaimers. The first is there's no such thing as an original or official fairy tale. Therefore, if I reference a source version that is different than the version of the fairy tale that you grew up with, that is completely okay. Don't let it bother you. As an amateur folklorist, I'd actually love to hear any alternate versions of these fairy tales. But as a person who is generally tired of BS, I'd really rather not argue about it. Disclaimer number 2 is that all opinions featured in this video are just that, my opinions. I appreciate that stories that are this old and perhaps foundational to somebody's childhood, etc., may inspire strong feelings and strong opinions that could be opposed with my own. But as I said, I am not here to argue. If you have a different take on a story, I encourage you to make your own video and honestly link it in the comments as long as it's not vitriolic toward me and this one. And disclaimer number 3, perhaps the most important out of all of them. Much like the folk and fairy tales of yore, this video and videos like it are not necessarily going to be kid-friendly. To help you guys stay safe, I've included more common trigger warnings in the description box of the video below, so please check those and use your judgment as to whether these videos are for you. With that out of the way, let's get to my quick review of Cinderella Liberator by Rebecca Solnit. In a turn that will surprise literally nobody who's heard this title, this story follows a young woman named Cinderella. And at the start of Solnit's version, she is much like we know her. She is a persecuted heroine who is left to live with her stepmother and stepsisters, and she's forced to do menial labor about their estate that leaves her covered in cinders and has earned her the nickname Cinderella. One day, the local prince, a young man named Prince Nevermind, decides to hold a ball to search for a wife for himself. The stepsisters are allowed to go, but Cinderella is not, and in her frustration, she calls upon a fairy godmother to help her. This fairy godmother asks the local lizards and mice, etc., to allow her to turn them into horses and attendants for Cinderella, and she gives her glass slippers and a fancy gown, and Cinderella makes her way to the ball. There, she dances with the prince, and when is asked about her identity, she runs off and leaves her famous glass slipper behind. Using this glass slipper, Prince Nevermind goes on a quest to find this very interesting young woman that he spoke to at his ball. And that's where the story kind of diverges from Cinderella as we know it. After the ball, Cinderella's animal friends are reverted back to their original forms, but only if they want to be. Some choose to stay horses and people. Cinderella gets angry at her fairy godmother and asks her why she didn't help her out of her bad situation before, to which the godmother replies, well, you never asked for help. Prince Nevermind does eventually find Cinderella, but rather than that setting off the classic marriage plot story that we all know and potentially love, they instead spend some time getting to know one another and talking and admitting to their respective lonelinesses, and decide rather than being married they should become friends. And Cinderella convinces Prince Nevermind to not be a prince and instead follow his dream of being a farmer or a laborer. From there, Cinderella opens a cake shop where she basically moonlights as a therapist to everyone who comes in and encourages them to follow their own dreams and become their truest selves. Also, she decides to start going by just Ella, which was her name before the Cinder got added to it. Hooray. I did not love Cinderella Liberator. I admit that I was wary of the story from the very beginning, mostly because the title smacks of that early 2010s Disney modern pseudo-feminism. You know, the sort where it appears that the creator of a text or a piece of media is attempting to respond to those half-baked critiques of fairy tale reimaginings for not being woke or feminist enough, and in doing so presents you with a veneer of empowerment over a new version of something, just that it can be more easily capitalized on in our current zeitgeist. But despite that, I tried to go into the story with an open mind. Perhaps the word liberator would actually do the heavy lifting that it promises, and the story synopsis promising to inspire young readers to change the world wouldn't steer me wrong. And perhaps I actually would have liked it better if I hadn't tempered my expectations so much and sort of let myself believe that that's what the story would be, because ultimately it was. Make no mistake, I love fairy tale reimaginings. It's why this series exists. And some modern retellings actually do push a feminist critique on our past and more modern sensibilities that I find really compelling, and it works for me. Cinderella Liberator just happens to not be one of them, and I think part of the reason is that it co-opts some of the language of liberation without actually going there. So let's stick with that title for a little bit. Who is being liberated by this Cinderella? We're presented with a feudal system, right? We have a prince, we have a king, etc. So the first group of people that might have been liberated that stuck out to me were the poor and working classes. If anything, Cinderella kind of screwed them over because there's a continuation of this feudal structure. However, the prince is incompetent and unwilling. It doesn't speak well for these poor classes that the person who's going to be leading them has decided to idealize their lifestyle rather than place an appropriate value on it. But since this is a story built for modern sensibilities, let's look for people that we look to in more modern day as people who require liberation. So folks of marginalized identities, people on the LGBT plus spectrum, people of color, people with disabilities. For all of the above, there's basically no mention. So all right, let's scratch the very bottom of the barrel of feminism. Are women liberated in this story? Sure, if they're cishet and white, and if the story says that they are redeemable. Overall, the content of the story, when paired with the title, indicates a deeply privileged understanding of a lack of something in a way that honestly felt very all lives matter to me. Much more interesting to me was actually who was overlooked and who I don't personally feel was overlooked in the original Cinderella tale. At one point, Cinderella asks the fairy godmother why she didn't offer her help before, saying, quote, "Why didn't you tell me I was free to go earlier?" said Cinderella. The godmother said, "I'm here to help people, but they have to ask for help. You never asked for help." Cinderella, who, as we all understand, is a child in an abusive situation, has the onus of her own liberation put upon her rather than the society that, by all rights, should be protecting her. The only irredeemable character in this book is the stepmother character, who turns into a howling wind that only says me, mine, mine, mine for the rest of all of eternity. She's meant to represent greed, the greed inside of every human that is supposed to kind of be at the root of everything bad that happens to us societally. And by giving her this end, which is, to be fair, far less grisly than the grim version of the story, for example, Solnit doesn't dismiss the structural and systemic injustices that theoretically this book is here to tackle, so much as she completely overlooks them. It's as though she isn't aware that they are there, which is far more troubling to me. I think my main issue with Cinderella Liberator is that it walks up to these really big, important topics. Themes that I'm pretty sure Solnit wanted to address, themes such as child abuse, strict gender norms, and perhaps even the crushing role of capitalism in perpetuating the former two. But it never really goes there. It never really addresses them. They're pointed out and then left completely unaddressed, except for when they can be pointed at as evidence on the page that the story is somehow supposed to be feminist. And sure, doing so in the 32 pages that this book spans would be a tall order, but hey, the original or source material fairy tales that stories like this draw from have stuck around in the public imagination precisely because they sneak a whole lot of contemporary cultural critique into a very, very short word count. And yet, despite all of my critique, I still can't discount Cinderella Liberator as part of a sort of modern fairy tale canon. It's still a product of a zeitgeist, albeit a distinctly white feminist one. It's still technically intergenerational. It's definitely written toward a younger audience and is made for an older parental figure to read to their young children. And it still builds off very recognizable motifs. Arthur Rackham's illustrations, for example, were a highlight of the reading experience of the story for me. And that iconic glass slipper doesn't even need to be paired with the word Cinderella to know that it's a part of the story. And perhaps because of these reasons, or perhaps because Solnit's writing speaks to the general public in a way that it just didn't for me, it still is a story that resonates with people. As of the time of this review, it has a 4.05 out of 5-star rating on Goodreads, and this compiles nearly 1,500 individual ratings. Presumably, at least a few of these people are people who did feel liberated by the message at the heart of this story. In my opinion, as much as I feel like it doesn't cancel theirs out. I don't really have a good conclusion for this, except for, like with any story, your mileage may vary. I personally didn't like it, and I would recommend one of these retellings that worked a little bit better for me. Or if you don't want to try any of these, but you are itching to get some Cinderella back into your life, read or watch the version of the story that you grew up with and take whatever meaning you want from there, even if all it brings you is just a little bit of nostalgia for an easier time. And that is it for this first ever 5-minute Fairy Tales video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up. And if you like me, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. I post videos every weekend, and I would love to have you join my little bookish family. Comment down below if you have a favorite fairy tale retelling that you would like for me to review in a short form way like this. Or if you lack the spoons to comment, feel free to leave an emoji in the comments for me just so that I know you made it this far in the video. Let's go with a blue heart. If you want to see more bookish content from me, all of my socials are linked in the description box below. You can find me on Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter. But for now, that's it for me. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you with my next video very soon. Goodbye.